Well, Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner also tackled the topic of housing this morning as he hit Capitol Hill testifying in front of the House Appropriations Subcommittee. Geithner told the committee that he expects a plan soon on how to deal with the mortgage mess of Fannie and Freddie. Today in Reaganomics, we bring you the man in the middle of this plan. Will he be forced to side with underwater homeowners looking for a break on their mortgages at the expense of taxpayers? Ed DeMarco, acting director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you.
You know, your critics, including Congressman Barney Frank, Elijah Cummings, they've been frustrated because they see this as a layup. You know what? Just give the money back to the homeowners, the ones that are underwater, that are really feeling the pain. Forgive some of that debt. But you haven't necessarily signed off and endorsed anything like that. Why not? What's your concern here?
So, I mean, there's two things going on here. There's an awful lot of underwater homeowners, and Fannie and Freddie certainly have mortgages that are underwater. Important thing for folks to understand is that 3 out of every 4 underwater homeowners whose mortgage is owned by Fannie and Freddie is current. These borrowers are making their monthly mortgage payment. They're honoring their financial obligation to pay their mortgage every month.
3 out of 4, so 25% are not current.
25% are not current. And for those, we actually at Fannie and Freddie, and FHFA as conservator of Fannie and Freddie, are offering a rich array of tools to help borrowers who are having trouble with their mortgage payment.
But not necessarily forgiving them of some of the debt?
That's correct. And what we are doing is we're offering an array of loan modification tools, forbearance plans, really tools that are tailored to the borrower's particular situation. But the fundamental thing for folks to understand about what we're doing and trying to provide assistance to borrowers is we're trying to maximize the assistance to borrowers, maximize their opportunity to stay in their home if they've got an ability to make a mortgage payment and a willingness to do so. But we're trying to construct this in a way in which we are minimizing the costs to the taxpayer of providing this assistance. So we're providing an array of assistance tools to borrowers, including loan modifications, but doing it in a way that we think gives the borrower the best opportunity to stay in their home.
I'm sorry, loan modifications, what exactly does that mean?
It essentially means that you redo the monthly mortgage payment, right?
So a little less so that they can...
Well, in some sense, a lot less. But we get the borrower into a mortgage that they've got an ability to repay.
Okay, but it's not going to change how much money they actually owe.
It is not going to change how much money they owe.
Do you foresee that changing? I mean, the political pressure coming from a number of Democrats on the Hill that would like to see that actually change, so that a portion of these mortgages would be forgiven. Of course, the taxpayers would bear the brunt of that bill because we'd all be having to pay, you know, in one way or another for that break.
So let's have your viewers understand sort of the decisions FHFA has made up to now and the question that is before us today. Up to now, what we've determined is that the modification tools that we are offering borrowers get them in the same monthly payment as they would get with principal forgiveness. So if the borrower ends up defaulting anyway, the taxpayer's loss is the same. If the borrower is successful on the modification, it allows them to stay in their house, and they stay in that house and start making mortgage payments, the taxpayer gets to share in the upside of that borrower's success using the tools we're doing. Right? If we forgive the principal up front and the borrower is successful, that upside all goes to the borrower, not shared with the taxpayer.
When do you see this
on Treasury right now? You've asked about this. The Treasury Department has recently changed the terms of the HAMP program, and we have said, okay, we need to evaluate this to see whether it changes, you know, our calculations and our assessment of this trade-off of providing assistance to the borrower.
I mean, is there pressure to try and, I mean, are you feeling pressure from whether it's on Capitol Hill or whether it's coming from the White House to try and fix this soon? Because people see housing as really, you know, the one thing that's holding this economy back.
Well, so there are certainly a lot of people that are drawing attention to this issue and saying that we should forgive principal. And my response is, that's fine. We are looking at it, but I've got a statutory responsibility to make sure that we maximize the assistance to homeowners, but we do so respectful of the support coming from the taxpayers and try to do this in a manner that minimizes the losses to the taxpayer. We are evaluating the latest change from Treasury to see if that calculus changes, and we'll have an announcement sometime next month. month.
Sometime next month. Okay, would it theoretically actually be a bit of a gift to the banks, right? Because if you are keeping, well, I guess either way, as long as you keep people in their homes, it's a gift to the banks. But if you forgive part of that mortgage, the bank's not forgiving it. It's you that's forgiving it, taxpayers that are forgiving it, and taxpayers then sort of have to turn to the banks and make up the difference.
So your viewers understand, part of the issue here is that these borrowers have second liens. It's being held by a bank. And if you forgive the first lien, if the second lien isn't written off, that's changing the loss position, and it's providing that benefit to the banks that you're talking about. Or even if the banks writes down a portion of the second because the first is written down, that's still providing a benefit to the banks. There's also a question of private mortgage insurance exists on a lot of these loans, and the private mortgage insurance company stands in a loss position ahead of the taxpayer. And, you know, those are all parts of what we have to evaluate here.
Do you feel that you can solve the mortgage crisis with the tools that you have in place right now? I mean, do you need Treasury involved? Do you need Elijah Cummings and Barney Frank telling you what to do? Or do you feel like what you've thus far put in place is enough to really solve the crisis?
So, I mean, I think it's a bit much to expect one person or one agency to be responsible for that you can or can't solve the crisis. Fannie and Freddie own about 60% of the mortgages in the country, but only 29% of the seriously delinquent loans. That means 70% of the seriously delinquent loans in the country are outside of Fannie and Freddie's portfolio, and my responsibility is just for overseeing Fannie and Freddie's portfolio. So there's a great deal of difficulty in the mortgage market that goes well beyond what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac own or are responsible for. And so it's a much broader collective effort of government agencies and private financial institutions that need to help solve this problem.
Do you think as a society, as an economy, we are changing enough that we're getting to the point where we may not need a Fannie and Freddie someday? We'll just leave it to the private markets, whether banks are willing to take on a mortgage with a home borrower that might not be quite up to stuff. That's their issue. I mean, other countries don't have a Fannie and Freddie, and some of them haven't, wound up in quite the same mortgage mess as we did.
Well, a lot of folks wonder why we've had Fannie and Freddie in conservatorship for 3.5 years. And the answer is because this is ultimately going to require the Congress of the United States to determine, what the resolution of Fannie and Freddie is and what replaces them in the marketplace, or are they transformed in some fashion. That's not my responsibility. That's the responsibility of Congress.
But do you have a view on it?
I think that what we have done recently at FHFA is we've issued a strategic plan for conservatorship. We sent it to the Congress and said, here are things we can do as conservator to start building for the future. And we are going to start taking those steps, but this is not going to preclude Congress deciding that they want a completely private mortgage-backed securities market in the future, or they want Fannie and Freddie replaced with something that is fully government or something in between.
You're going to stay out of that one.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, and I'm staying out of it too by giving Congress the opportunity to make that decision. That's not ours to make.
Indeed. All right, Ed DeMarco, thank you very much, Acting Director of Federal Housing Finance.